And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to the MongoDB Podcast Live. My name is Michael Lin. I'm a developer advocate at MongoDB, and we've got another great live stream for you today with a friend of mine, Mr. Matt Kalan. We're going to bring him on shortly. He is a distinguished solutions architect at MongoDB, and today we're going to cover the topic of unified data architectures. We're going to explain a little bit about what that means. If you're wondering, if you're curious, let me know where you're coming from. Where are you joining the stream from? What's your experience with unified data architectures? What's your experience with data lakes, with other products in this space? Databricks, Snowflake. What other products are you using to create a unified data architecture? And let me know where you're at, where you're joining the stream from. I'm on the East Coast of the United States, little city, little town called Newtown. And I'm really delighted to be here today to present this amazing topic. Welcome, Anthony Richards from Michigan. Wow. So we've got Michigan, we've got Bangladesh. MD Hassan is joining us. All right. Stay tuned for some trivia. We're going to be covering some topics today, and I want to see if you're paying attention. So we've got some trivia questions, and we'll be giving away a t-shirt just like this one. So this is a MongoDB podcast t-shirt. If you want to win one of these, stay tuned and listen. We're going to be dropping some hints as we get started. Without further ado, let's bring Mr. Matt Kalan on stage. Matt, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Hey, Mike. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. And where in the world are you, Matt?
I'm actually in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the middle of the country. I started at the company and lived in New York for 15 years and then met a girl and got married and had kids.
Isn't that always the way?
Absolutely.
Welcome, Lisa. Welcome, Lisa Barboza from Austin. Great to have you joining us. As folks are joining, we're covering unified data architectures today. We're going to get into that. Pennsylvania. Welcome, William. I'm in Pennsylvania as well. Unified data architectures. Matt, first of all, well, introduce yourself. Let folks know what you do at MongoDB, and then we'll jump into the topic at hand.
Sure. So if you're here long enough, they make up titles for you. So Distinguished Solution Architect is my title. There's kind of three of us globally. Been here 11 years, so have worked with probably 1,000 customers over that time. And my background is in broad enterprise software. So everything touches data. So it's been useful to know how do people build apps and how do they spread out data across their enterprise, and then come here and really help with a lot of those problems. So it's been great. I love the company and, love working with customers every day.
Yeah. A lot of respect for what you've done for, well, I guess it's 11 years now at MongoDB. You've done a lot of work in the solutions architecture space. And like you said, worked with just a ton of customers, having a huge impact, helping customers understand how to leverage data and MongoDB along the way. So kudos for all the work you've done. It's been great working with you. Prior to MongoDB, were you a developer? Did you work in databases? What did you do prior to MongoDB?
Yeah. So after I studied computer science at school and then, or university, as they say across the pond, and started out with a internet consulting company because you could focus just on internet at the top of the bubble, and did end-to-end solution delivery. So it was a great experience to work at a consulting company because you do go around to many customers and learn about many different technologies and many of their problems. But then I realized I like to really help them solve upfront the problem and leave the testing to the other people who enjoy it more. Debugging is the worst thing in the world. So then I got into really more pre-sales or solution architecture in trading, like automated trading, and then more enterprise software, and then here. So it's been, it keeps getting better. Keep enjoying it.
Yeah, well, you clearly love what you do because you're quite good at it. So let's dive into the topic at hand. We're talking about a unified data architecture. Let's start with a definition. What does that mean, Matt? What is a unified data architecture?
Yeah, let me share my screen because that will be the best way. There we go. So what I'm talking about, a lot of us and me in the past focus on building one application, right? And it's easy to focus on that, but customers might use many different apps, right? And you often want to know about everything about your customer you often want to bring data. If you look on the left-hand side here, you want to bring data to serve, an application function from across the rest of the company.
Mhm.
And that's the first problem that usually arises. Imagine you're creating a new app, and depending on the company, I'm not saying this is all companies, but in the worst case, you have to go to all these systems of record and all these upstream data sources and be like, can I get your data? Can I get it real time? And they're like, no, we don't want you to hurt the performance of our database. Like, we'll give you an overnight batch. Or, and in the best case, look, some companies have Kafka and they're publishing a lot to Kafka and you can consume it. So like, that's the first challenge something like Kafka does help with, but it's usually not everything. You still need to go around and kind of wrangle data. So that's kind of the first challenge. I forgot I build this out. Here we go. There we go. So that's the first wing. And you have so it takes a long time to build an app. You have different people scrubbing it. So you might have data quality across all those apps. So it takes a long time. And then the next challenge is that's great for each app. You have the data you need, but then that same data might be in multiple apps. And so now if users are using multiple apps across maybe channels, right? You might go into, if you're in retail, you might go to a store and then there's different inventory possibly from if you go to the mobile app, and you might be using both of those channels, we call them, in the store, right? Like you literally might be seeing inconsistent data right there. So that's a problem. You're wasting a lot of resources storing data multiple times, and it might be inconsistent. And a lot of times the first place you bring the data together is in your centralized data lake, data warehouse, what have you. But that's often not real time. Again, the inconsistencies, someone has to deal with that. What if both of those apps or many of those apps are sending the same data to the data lake, and then the people managing the business are looking at the data and like, well, which data are they looking at? Is it the in-store? Is it total inventory? Like there's a lot of nuances in how the data is brought together. And often data lineage is the term in this space, where how do I know where the data came from? So if I see a dashboard with our sales or inventory levels or what have you, I can't usually drill down into individual row level, like individual orders from a dashboard that's meant to aggregate everything. And so you don't have that lineage, so to speak, to then drill down into the rest of the business. And ideally, if you're this internal analytics user, this business user on the right-hand side, ideally you can see everything, but that's not what data lake products are built for. We could talk more about column oriented. They're more like optimized for aggregating the total number of orders, but they're not optimized for seeing one order and where it's being shipped to, what the customer details are. That's something more a document or row oriented store is good for. But those are the challenges.
I get it. It's like you want a process, an ETL process that feeds a data lake, a data repository that summarizes, so you have swift access to summary level data, but you also still need access to that row level detail. So it's a constant challenge. So
sure. And actually, to add one more problem, now in the era of Gen AI, we can start to give a lot more power to the users, and they will have the expectation you know everything about them. So if I'm in the store and I just bought something, or if I'm on my mobile app and I bought something, and then I said, ask the chatbot, let's imagine, like, hey, what else might I need for my camping trip? Or what, based on my spending patterns, like, what else would you suggest? They would expect you to know everything they bought up to the second, really. And that data is often not in the data lake. So then you want more in this middle layer. You want to be able to aggregate real-time information across channel, you might call omni-channel, and across, products and across your company. And that is not served well by just having a data lake as the first place you aggregate it.
Yeah. So we're going to stop for a question. Well, a comment and a question, but Uma L is asking, what makes Matt so great? More sales or innovative? I don't know if there is an answer to that, but
I don't know if I'm the best person to ask that, but I have to agree with the question for sure. But I do think I'm pretty good at my job. And it's mostly, I think, having a business acumen. It's not just diving into the tech. It's like, why are you doing, what problem or opportunity is there? And I really love having more tools in my tool belt to be able to put that solution together. So really, I take the solution architecture kind of title to heart. It's just like naturally where I come from. And so it's been such a great fit to work in it.
Yeah, fantastic. And we used to work together. And I used to be a solutions architect as well. And what a role. Like if you're a developer and you're also a good communicator, maybe consider solutions architecture role. So, okay. So this is the before state. We're talking about typical architectures for data and applications. So there's some problems that we've talked about so far. I'm curious, folks that are coming into the stream, what other problems are you experiencing, or do you echo these problems? Are you challenged by some of the same situations that Matt's presented in the current state? So we're about to get into like what a future state might look like. Anything else you want to cover in the problem state, Matt?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking the audience. Audience, feel free too, as well.
Yeah.
Those are the main things. When we talk about the technology that you use to do this, or one thing I would say is some people do try to, if you've heard the term master data, some people do try to aggregate master data, in maybe near real time. Historically, it's been with relational databases where you need one schema across all of your upstream systems. And it is so time consuming. And I've worked with many customers that failed. And so they have tried without something like Mongo with a dynamic schema, and we'll get the solutions in a second, but without a dynamic schema where you can handle variably structured data and everything, it's just really difficult to do. And that's why the data lake is kind of the first place things get aggregated a lot of the time.
Yeah. We got some positive feedback from Liza. True. Real time is an awesome way to enhance customer experience for sure. And AI, although it's an amazing, I guess in the solution space, it's amazing. It does complicate the architecture. We're going to talk about AI today and how that fits in.
Yeah, for sure. Because it used to be when you think about data, because it's all about consumption. Like to help you choose technologies, you have to think about how it's going to be consumed. And it used to be, I think about application or API consumption as one way, SQL reporting as another, and then data science as another. But then Gen AI is a fourth. So it does complicate the consumption patterns.
Yeah, it's a good thing there's a solid platform that allows you to build on your data. We're going to talk about some of the stuff in the solution space. I just want to call this out. The problem is too many different data formats and products that do not speak to each other. This is William Arova. Thanks for the comment. Do you agree, Matt?
Yeah. I mean, you could call it the problem, and unfortunately that's the reality. So then the problem it has historically been a data platform that couldn't handle the differences. And what we talk about, it's kind of like in code. If people are familiar with the term polymorphism, the idea that, maybe from an object-oriented perspective, like everything might be a product, but then you have, a shirt and you have pants, and being able to handle them in code, you usually use the concept of polymorphism to handle them differently. And you want your data platform to handle those just as well. And that's, we'll get into some of that, but that's where the dynamic schema can come in, where you want to govern your data that at least has details that make it a product, but you don't care if some products have 10 fields, the others 20. You want to easily represent that.
Yeah. I want to encourage the listeners to put your comments and questions in the comments, of course. This is not really related, but I want to address it. Evariste, how does a computer science graduate become a data architect? I don't think there's an easy answer to this, but Matt, do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, you know what? At least in the States, a lot of the times the university programs are kind of abstract, not like creating, not training you to do a job, right?
Yeah.
But, I think computer science, information systems is probably a good background to then look to be a data architect. But, I encourage you to do other things as well. Like when you see it from the user perspective, the consumer of the data, it's helpful to understand that as well before you go maybe right into being a data architect, or at least work closely with your customers, like, which is always a good practice to really understand their role. Because I've worked with some data architects that are so focused on let me have an elegant data model, but without considering how it's going to be used, which is really important.
And the other thing I'll add is that for me anyway, it's about gaining experience and experience across all levels of the architecture. So having the ability to understand what it takes to write a workable software program that interacts with data, and then working with the data platforms itself, understanding what the various databases look like, from legacy relational to document to column store. Having that, you're going to need all of that information and all of that experience to become an effective architect. So great question. Thanks for leaving that there. Matt, what do you say we start talking about some of the solutions, some of the future state?
For sure. Let me go jump to that. So, I still obviously have a lot of data sources. And so the question is, or what I talked about is not just waiting at the data lake to be able to aggregate all the cross-silo data, because I want to know, the such a common thing turn around is like customer 360, or talked about as customer 360. The idea that a customer expects you to know everything about them, right? And so if you can have a shared service, and where this fits in the organization depends, but often enterprise architecture or some shared service group might own this function, where they're in charge of working with upstream systems really before maybe apps need it, working with upstream systems, having the change data capture capability to get the data upstream in near real time, and being able to handle the data pipelines in a unified way. So you're not having different teams do it in a different way and scrubbing it differently. And then you land that in what we call an operational data layer. You might call it a data fabric. You might call it a master data hub, because often it is master data, kind of shared master data. But you need a platform to land it where it's accessible in a real-time way, where I can. So then when I build applications downstream, I don't need to take a copy of the data. If I have confidence in this data service, often it's by domain. So I might have a set of APIs that are for customer, for product, and for different domains of data. And think of it almost like a data, like an app store, but like a data store, almost, or data as a service. You might call it,
Yep.
And so then when you start building new apps, you can build like a customer portal where you know everything about the customer. Or these days, I can build a chatbot off of that data using something like, and I'll get to why Mongo is good for this, but something like MongoDB Atlas to then vectorize the data. And everything is right there that I can start building apps really quickly and consuming it in all the ways that I want. Instead of, you remember the current state, when I had a new app, I had to spend months just wrangling the data, mapping it, building data pipelines, and all of that. I mean, very laborious, and it's not adding business value, right? Like if I can make this data available really quickly, and that's how I beat out competition. That's how I, engage the customer really well. So, so once I get that, and I think I build that out here. Yeah. Hopefully it's what I talked about already. Yep. And then I still have the choice about, do I push it downstream? What's nice about this is I might push the data to a data lake from the operational data layer, because I've already cleaned it. I've already spent time making it consumable to the rest of the business. That would be a great place to then send it downstream to the data lake where it's in a unified kind of manner. I still might also push individual app data, because apps might enrich and create their own data as well. That may or may not be pushed back into the hub. And so that might also come back down. But because it's already organized by domain, it makes it much easier to understand the data when it gets to the data lake. And then the last piece is now, I've talked about a customer already. You can have a customer portal or chatbot or whatever that can access all of the data in a near real-time basis. But I also have those internal users I talked about before who want to look at and manage the business. They should have the capability of going to one single place to get those details that we talked about they couldn't get before. Because really, and this I'll talk about column versus row oriented again. The idea that I might have dashboards that are aggregates of data, like maybe of just a few fields.
Mhm.
Like, and you can think of those as columns, right? Like I might have the amount of my orders, and the one dimension of the data might be the geography that it was sold in, or what have you. And I might want to build a report just from those two column-oriented stores, like Databricks and Snowflake.
Mhm.
You may hear about Parquet files, which is often the underlying data format of these products. They're great at scanning data on a few columns. But then if I want to drill down into one order, that's not what they're built for, because the data is spread across columns. If I want 20 fields from the order, I'm literally on disk somewhere in the cloud, so you don't see it, but I'm literally going across 20 different files, even possibly, to grab that data and bring it into a dashboard. And so that's why it's often not supported. Like, you don't usually have the ability to drill down individual orders. But if you connect those, what we might call data apps, like dashboards, also to the data layer, the operational data layer, then you get the drill down. You get the data lineage and the ability to really have confidence in the data, because you can then say, hey, this doesn't look right in my report. And you can go drill down into the details and understand, is it an anomaly? Like, is it incorrect, or is it correct? You have a lot more confidence in managing your business really well. So,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of benefits of this, engaging your customer in the right time, in the right channel, with the right kind of capabilities. And then also for internal users to see across the whole business and drill down and have that lineage.
Yeah. So what are the challenges that I heard quite often when I spoke with customers implementing data stores like this, like a unified data store that incorporates data that will be consumed and used by internal users, typically like an analytics team or data science team? Often they're leveraging tools that have been around for a long time. Tableau, Power BI. Folks in the stream, like, let me know what tools you're using for AI or for analytics. The complaint was always, well, I can't use Tableau against my data that is document based. That's no longer the case. What's the solution there, Matt?
Yeah, no, good thing to bring up. And I could talk about now specifically what MongoDB Atlas kind of enables in this solution, and in particular, the reporting and such. So I think a lot of people know MongoDB, is document or object oriented, and that supports your APIs beautifully, right? That are JSON oriented and kind of usually JSON payload, or GraphQL. There's a lot of providers as well. But a lot of people don't also know that there is Atlas Data Federation that supports a SQL interface. We call Atlas SQL. And so you have the ability to not only consume the data with, with your favorite programming language and APIs and GraphQL, but you can point now your tools like Power BI, Tableau, all the great BI tools out there. And that is really necessary, because, Mongo is loved by developers because what they use are objects. But we're not telling everyone, like, hey, all those SQL users, you got to learn something else. You got to learn Python, which some are, by the way. Some data scientists are learning Python, but SQL is still ubiquitous out there.
Yeah.
And for good reason. It's kind of easy to reason about. Like, everyone understands Excel, right? And you can think about in rows and columns. And so it's great to have that ability where it's kind of a serverless interface. So you get just charged per query. And if you don't use it, you don't get charged. And then we will map a SQL query to a Mongo query, which you don't have to worry about, and then return that to you. It's important to note, you still want to think about column versus row storage. Like, where Mongo Atlas SQL will give good performance is especially where the data, what the query patterns are going to be, and you can index them. Right. And so if you have ad hoc queries, that's honestly not something like MongoDB is perfect for. That's why the vendors like a Databricks or Snowflake and the cloud providers have other products as well, are really good for scanning individual columns of data. Like, that's not something we do happen to have it, by the way, in an Atlas Data Lake product we have.
We have columnar store, you're saying?
Yeah. So that's worth looking at. But I wouldn't encourage you for their centralized data lake. Like, that's good for the app team to be able to, look at the data they want in a column oriented way.
Yeah. I think that's a really powerful feature that we've just kind of put out there. But if you're leveraging SQL today and you're looking to improve the efficiency of your data architecture, and you want to incorporate MongoDB as a part of that, you're still able to use SQL at every layer. Even from the application, you can send SQL to a data federation based data federation. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And I think this is such a powerful point. I want to make this the trivia question. So the trivia question we're going to ask, don't answer yet, but what feature of MongoDB Atlas enables you to leverage Power BI, Tableau, and other BI tools? So so we kind of put the answer in there. It's not data federation. It's a specific feature within data federation. So hope you were listening. Go ahead and put your answers in the comments, and we'll choose a couple people at random for a MongoDB podcast t-shirt, which, Matt, you'll get, by the way, for being a guest.
Oh, that's awesome. I've worn all my others down, so I'm excited.
I'm at the point now where I can't take a new t-shirt until I let go of one. So it's like one in, one out. But
exactly.
Yeah. All right. So this is the future state. If you're building an operational data layer, what steps do developers and infrastructure, the operations team, what steps do they need to take to be able to implement something like this?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because often you'll show the future state to people and like, great, I want that. Let's just snap a finger and I wish I had that. But how do you run a business and run and work on apps and everything while you're changing to the future state, right? And that's really the a goal of enterprise architecture, especially in large companies where it's even more complicated. Often what we'll talk about. So imagine, most everyone has systems of record, like where the data is really generated, right? Like what customers are interacting with. And then one of the first things people come up with, well, how do I make that consumable in the rest of the company? I can't just move it all to, let's say, Atlas immediately. But what they'll often do, and a lot of people are familiar with the strangler pattern, you'll often look at data, and you can look at it, I won't talk about it now, but often look at data that there would be a lot of value in making scalable, lower latency, consumable across the company. Where is the most value in opening that data up? And let's bring that a data set at a time, or an API at a time, dragging the data with it. And so let me migrate that to Atlas, for example. Like we even have a relational migrator tool where, assuming the data is in a relational database, you can actually take your schema, import it into this relational migrator tool, and you can map tables, like multiple tables, into documents. And then we will do a one-time migration and then a continuous migration, so you can actually cut over to Atlas running that workload instead. So I don't recommend a big bang approach, right? Like, let's just shut down the business and migrate for 6 months. Like, you can't do that. So, but take a data set at a time. You might keep them in sync at first. Like you'll write to maybe the upstream system and the operational data layer. And you might even keep that going, right? If you have change data capturing the data being written to the upstream system, and also writing it to Atlas in near real time, then you have a choice of where to consume the data. And I alluded to this before. This is something Mongo is uniquely positioned for, because you need at least 3 of these things. You need to be able to handle the data changing upstream. You need, really a dynamic schema. You need the ability to do expressive querying as well. Because if I write this to other, let's say, NoSQL databases, but I can only query by primary key, that's not going to make it easily consumable by the rest of the company, right? So I need expressive querying. It also helps to have ACID transactions where I can update multiple data at the same time. And then I also need easy scaling and high availability, maybe to do a fourth. Like because I'm putting this in a place where I'm going to allow the company to consume it, I need it to be easily scalable. And with Atlas, you just horizontally scale. The application doesn't change. The connection string doesn't change. High availability is built in. There's not a better option for this kind of architecture. And like we talked about, there's tons of benefits of this architecture in terms of customer experiences and insight into the business and everything.
Yeah. So at every layer, there's a variety of solutions that could be implemented. And what you're recommending is really the pattern, right? You're not necessarily recommending, I mean, apart from MongoDB Atlas, you're not recommending any specific products or vendors in that space. But what you're recommending is the pattern, which is really this unified approach to providing access to your data at all layers. And I think there are probably other solutions point solutions that could be kind of woven together in this architecture pattern. But I think one of the great things about MongoDB Atlas is that this is the approach that the engineering team has taken from day one. Let's solve the problems that our developers are experiencing, and let's provide as full a full suite of tools that enable developers to effectively build great applications and do it in line with best practices. So I do want to touch on, let's start all the way on the left. The upstream data sources, they're going to come from various places. There's going to be various data feeds that come in depending on your particular industry and application. And they may be in different formats. They may be different databases, but there's this data pipeline approach. What's in that space, in the data pipeline space?
Yeah, no, great point. Yeah, I can definitely talk about, categories of technologies that are really useful. What I see in customers, I mean, it's amazing how ubiquitous Kafka is, right? That is one of the most common technologies. Historically, it was ETL tools, but a lot of ETL tools were oriented around batch. And as I talked about, if you don't get the data in a timely manner into the data layer, it's not as ideal. I mean, certainly you could do it, and especially batch files that you get from vendors are going to be batch, whether it's historical market data or weather data that might be batch, or, so you still might use ETL. And more ETL tools, I think, are working on a near real-time basis these days, a bit more. There's also the change data capture vendors out there. Many of them do support writing to Mongo and reading from whatever database is upstream. So those are definitely good categories to look into. The data pipeline itself, the ETL tool will help you do that. If you're working with Kafka, I find what's good about it is it gets the data in a near real-time basis. You can send one message at a time, one record at a time.
Categorize it. Yep.
Yeah. But I don't find a lot, and this is not my core space, but I've not found customers using a lot of tools that will handle the data pipeline very well for them. They're usually, you could do something like Kafka, KSQL. And now, to let everyone know, is Atlas actually has stream processing in preview now. So I can consume a Kafka stream and then in a Mongo query language way, using our aggregation pipeline, which supports dynamic schemas, by the way, you can actually transform that data and then land it into Atlas transformed. So that is really nice. So it's in preview. You can try it out. But it's up to you. If you're familiar with KSQL and Kafka and you're already using that, that's fine. We're pretty agnostic. But it is nice if you're a Mongo developer to be able to use stream processing because Kafka is strongly typed, whereas Mongo, our stream processing really appreciates the dynamic schema like we do at the database level and can make it easy to handle different messages of different formats and such.
Yeah, that's a powerful feature. So Atlas Stream Processing is available in preview at the moment. You can check that out. And we also have the Atlas Kafka connector, right? If you want to go directly.
Good point. Yeah. Absolutely. And that makes it really easy, whether with Confluent or just vanilla Kafka. You can run in Confluent Cloud and all that. Easily.
Love those guys at Confluent. They're doing some great stuff. Terrific. Okay, so where do we go from here? We've got the data pipelines. Then we're talking about the operational data layer.
Yeah. And then so that is a data platform, right? And obviously I've explained why Atlas is best for it. Other people probably try relational like I talked about, but it is very challenging to iterate the schema faster than it's changing. Because keep in mind, there's lots of data sources upstream and the consumers on the right-hand side are going to be asking for new data all the time. And how fast can you get it into the operational data layer? And if you can't get it fast enough, they're going to go around it. Yeah. And then you start to have the sprawl that we just talked about, right? How many of you as developers would just sit and wait, tell your business sorry, we can't get the data. No, you're going to go right to the source. You're going to get someone senior enough to let you get the data in. And now you're working around that enterprise, the beautiful enterprise architecture vision, right?
Yeah.
So agility and time to market is pivotal here if you want to keep things well governed and tidy and everything.
Yeah.
So really important.
Absolutely. So we missed a question, and we kind of covered this earlier, but I want to go back for Musekwa and answer what does it take to become a data architect? Maybe revisit that for just a moment. Now that we have some more context about some of the tools and processes that we're going to be diving into, if someone's interested in becoming a data architect, what are some of the things that we want to add to our resume?
Yeah, I think probably there's some enterprise architecture trainings out there. Like TOGAF is one of the certifications, TOGAF, that a lot of people have heard about. I don't have one, and so I've just had a lot of practical experience. But I think when a data architecture is kind of part of enterprise architecture, because you do want to be thinking about not just the data. You do want to be thinking about how the data is used and how to do change management and everything, and look at this whole picture, not just the data picture. So that could be, an area of training to learn. And I think playing around with Python, learning to be a developer, understanding what it takes to consume the data, playing around with the BI tools, playing around with large language models and Gen AI and things like, Atlas Vector Search, like understanding what your users are doing makes you much better in any of these competencies, whether it's data architecture or enterprise architecture or what have you.
Yeah, it's one of those roles where you really need to have a wealth of experience across the software development and infrastructure space in order to be effective, in my opinion. I think it's a difficult thing to be like a junior data architect. And I think starting in that path, the great thing is, like, in today's world, it's no longer like get the experience, put it on your resume and show your resume. It's actually build something and get some experience. Get GitHub going, build an application, show what you can do, and then go from there. And attend great informational sessions like the MongoDB Podcast Live and get some experience and knowledge through that. By the way, I'll drop a little, hopefully not too annoying, pitch a little bit for the MongoDB podcast. If you like this content and you want to stay up on recent events and recent technology, we deliver 2 podcast episodes every week on the MongoDB podcast. It's available in audio format on all podcast networks. You can get more information at mongodb.com/podcast or on all podcast networks, Spotify, Google, Apple Podcast. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what your desires are in the tech space. Happy to cover all of those comments and questions that come through that channel. Matt, what are some podcasts that you listen to? How do you learn?
That's a really good question. So I work from home, so I don't have a great place that I listen to podcasts. I guess if I do, it's not about technology. The guys recline, just about what's going on in the world and everything. But how I learn, definitely playing with stuff, right? What's nice, what I love about this job is you hear about all the trends, or at least a lot of them that are adjacent to Mongo. And so, I got into Spark really early because I'm like, all these customers are talking about Spark. Well, let me build something. And honestly, what I built probably 8 years ago is like Spark hasn't changed all that much. Like, still, I understand what customers I talk to that are using it, what their challenges are. So it's amazing how just getting hands-on with something, it's memorable, and it tends to last a while. It depends. I mean, some technology, large language models were not around that long ago, so you need to keep learning. But I do it just by staying informed and playing around with stuff. It's nothing. It's unfortunately not for me a podcast, but I do think everyone should listen to yours.
Appreciate that. So if you want to get started, you want to jump in and learn what MongoDB Atlas is all about, you can start for free. I don't want to make this a commercial, but it kind of is, I guess. There are links below in the description of this stream. And by the way, this is being recorded. It's going to be available for review after the fact. It'll be an event video in LinkedIn, and it'll be available on YouTube as well. So make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel for MongoDB. It's just youtube.com/MongoDB. And check the links below. There's a paper that it's talking about application intelligence, and I wanted to cover that briefly. Matt, are you familiar with the white paper that we're linking folks to?
Yeah, and the reason, because we had talked about what white paper would be useful. I do wish I would write a little more on this topic in particular. I think the challenge is we're often talking with customers about this left-hand side, left of the internal analytics. And so we're not always putting out things about when to guide which to use or not, which I think I'm going to start trying to blog about it. But the app-driven intelligence white paper explains where within the analytical space MongoDB is a good fit. I talked about, slower moving data, aggregating dashboards for real forecasting, where real time is not that important. Yeah, that's the data lake, vendors are pretty good for that. Yeah. But the challenge is often the customer is interacting with you right now in some channel. They're online, they're in the store, and you need data immediately. And that's not in your data lake, right? That's in your application. And so if you, consumers are more and more kind of hungry for data. And so if you make the data that you have about them in your applications and across your applications from this data layer available to them, we call that a kind of app-driven intelligence. So even though it's in the application, I'm not only sending my orders, I might want to look at my spend with you over time for whatever reason, right? I'm like worried about spending too much on Amazon. Like I really like to know how much I'm spending. Or you could show them they're not spending as much as a lot of their counterparts. So you encourage them to spend more, however you want to do it. But, and especially with IoT, where I have so much data these days, you need to aggregate it to make any sense of it. And that's within the application with real-time data. And that's what MongoDB is really well suited for, because you have the data already sitting there. The nice thing about stream processing is allows you to create materialized views is the term. So as data is coming across being written to Mongo, you can also listen to data in Mongo and then aggregate it and prepare it in a different way that's good to show in your app as well through the same API that you're used to, the same MongoDB driver. You can use Atlas SQL on it. So you can even MongoDB charts, Atlas charts. So I can embed real-time charts into my applications. So if you think about the scope of within your application, the data is already sitting there. A lot of MongoDB tools and products are meant for you to maximize the value of that and make it available to users in your applications. So that's kind of app-driven intelligence. Different maybe from the internal users that are really the users of the data lake and the data warehouse and everything. Because often they will want to merge the data that's not only in Mongo, they'll want to merge the data with data in the rest of the company as well. And so almost by definition, you're not only going to look at Mongo for that like longer term data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I love that we kind of have solutions in all of these spaces. And you mentioned Atlas charts. I've been really diving deeply into charts. And if you've got the data there, just leveraging charts is so dead simple. I mean, you jump into the charts tab, you get you create a data source from your MongoDB data, even from your data federation, which can incorporate multiple databases with a single connection string, even non-MongoDB data, for Parquet, for example, with a single connection string, and the data becomes available to you in charts. And one of the great, I guess, like enhancements that they just added is Atlas billing. You mentioned billing, like it's important to have visibility into what your spend is, and you want to keep things under control. The best way to do that is to provide visibility, not just for yourself, but for your organization. Creating charts. There's a sample Atlas billing chart that's just available. You can just like hit a button and there you go. So so if you haven't checked that out, that is also available in the Atlas platform. Thanks for the comment, Lisa. I hope I'm saying your name right, Lisa or Liza. What's new in data? Great podcast with John Cute. So check that out. That's what she's learning with. If you have suggestions for other folks on the stream that are looking to learn about unified data architectures or anything in the software development space, in the data architecture space, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'll try and raise some awareness on those podcasts. Podcasts are just a great way to learn, I think.
Yeah. 100%. So our chief product officer, Sahir, pointed out stratechery. I think it's strategy mixed with tech.
Oh, nice.
I'm getting it's probably strategy. Oh,
strategery.
Yeah. No.
No.
It's something like that. We'll have to
all right. if anybody knows what that podcast is, let us know. We'll
stratechery. But anyway, your point about charts, because some people ask, like, when do I use charts versus Tableau and Power BI and those tools? So charts is, for those familiar with the document model, it's a first-class citizen, and you can build charts from that document model. So that tends to be the app teams, right? Because, I talked about all those users of Tableau and Power BI are more familiar with SQL. So charts is great for operational reporting, dashboards that you can embed or send out to users, but the app team is building them. Whereas the Power BI and Tableau and the Atlas SQL is for the internal users to build their own reports, because they don't have to know the MongoDB document model. So both are very useful, and that's why we have both of them.
Yeah. Okay, so we mentioned at the start that we were going to briefly cover Gen AI. I view it as like a real enabler of better customer experiences with your data. And you did touch briefly on vector search as a driver for that, an enabler to create customized implementations of Gen AI features in your app. But maybe talk a little bit about Gen AI in the space of unified data architectures, Matt.
Yeah, perfect. So if you think about because it's all about consumption, and one thing I alluded to but didn't explain totally is I get to a lot of customers that will talk about, like, where should I put this data? Should I put it in Mongo or Databricks or Snowflake or S3? And because they're only focused on where to store it, I can't answer their question. All of those are fine for storing data. In fact, if I want to store data and not consume it, just put it on really cheap S3 object storage and you're good to go. But you need to, I understand why people are focused on that, because that's the first thing chronologically they have to do. Oh, I have this data. I need to put it somewhere. Where should I put it? But what you really need to do is focus on how is it going to be used. And so before anyone thinks about where am I going to store it, you first have to think, well, how am I going to use it once it's stored? And so I talk about at least 4 consumption patterns, right? It's APIs, which MongoDB is perfect for. I mean, JSON payload, if that, that's our bread and butter, right? But then other are SQL reporting. And I talked about Atlas SQL is great for getting at the data that's in MongoDB.
Did you say Atlas SQL?
I might have said that. Yeah, I might have said that. Maybe worth remembering. I don't know. But and then there's data science, where that is a bit of a hybrid, because a lot of customers will use Python, Spark and such. We have connectors for those. We have Mongo Arrow, it's called, which is Python APIs for consuming like NumPy and Pandas data frames and everything. So it makes it really easy to explore your data in Mongo. But you really do have to understand, do you want a document or row-oriented store that MongoDB is great for, or do you want to scan your data? Because then you might want to think about, Parquet and some of the data lake vendors for that. But then the fourth is Gen AI and large language models. And I'm not sure if everyone knows that how these models often work is they take content. It could be text, which a lot of people are familiar with in ChatGPT, but it could even be pictures, video, audio, any kind of content that the model's trained on. And it can create what's called a vector, or an array of numbers, basically, which could be a couple thousand, long. And they find things that are similar by comparing vectors that are representing the data with a prompt that has also been turned into a vector. And so this doesn't fit any of the other models. It's not like SQL. It's maybe a little like data science, but it's not like APIs per se. So this is another consumption pattern. And some of the characteristics that you want to think about of what's a good product for that is, do I need it in real time? And the answer often is yes. Because if I want a chatbot or some similarity search, and I'm exposing it to customers or users, they're going to want context of what's happening right now. They don't want to just query ChatGPT, which is updated as of 2021. I think they might have released. It's more recent now, but it's still not up to today, and it's not your private data, right? Yeah. So, the large language model by itself is not sufficient. You often want to do what's called retrieval augmented generation, which we won't talk a lot about here, but that's an architecture where you need an operational store that has your transactional data, like up to the second data, and also vector forms of that data, which when you write the data, let's say to Atlas, you make a call to a large language model, whether it's OpenAI or any of the foundational models out there, and you get a vector back, and you can store that right alongside your data in Atlas. And then when you want have a customer use a chatbot and using their own data, what you'll do, and there's frameworks for this like LangChain or Llama Index and others, but which you can use to speed up your development. But basically, you'll make a call. Let's say the prompt or the question that you're asking the chatbot, that the user is asking the chatbot, you'll create a vector from that by calling an OpenAI or some API. And then you might ask MongoDB, hey, show me all the results that are close to this in the private data. Like, what are the user's orders? What is product catalog data of the company that I want that might answer the customer's question? And I return that to this Gen AI application, and that provides it as context to the large language model that you might call in real time as well. And then you do get the benefit of a text answer or a visual answer or what have you. But like, that is a very different consumption pattern, and it really encourages real time. And so if you hear real time and vectors, like Mongo is, we just had it was really happy to see Retool did a survey of the state of AI, and they actually found Mongo had the highest NPS scores, Atlas Vector Search, of any of the vector databases, and it was the second most often used. And to get that in a platform that also can support your transactional data and text search, because we have Atlas Search as well for relevant search, it really makes the development super simple. I mean, nothing's super simple, but it's simplest of the options out there, because you can use one platform and not have to tie together with data pipelines a bunch of different, like vector database and another database and a text search engine and the like. So that's how it fits into this. It really encourages having an operational data layer to get all your data as much as possible about the user or about what you're trying to do all in one place, and it's in real time.
So thinking about the application architecture prior to the specific implementations, and I think that's like so key in the foundational approach to leveraging MongoDB. It's like, think about how the data is going to be accessed first, then set about creating a schema that supports the use cases, the patterns of read and write, and then visualize that in an architectural pattern that enables all of those use cases effectively and efficiently. Great question from Shivam. In case of data-oriented platforms or products, what is the best way to know whether the architecture of the database is structured properly? And I think he's talking about the schemas, right? I'm going to interpret that.
It's actually a great question that not enough people think about, unfortunately. Because I get, a lot of us have grown up using relational databases, and you were kind of always encouraged to do a third normal form structure, where basically you store the data in one way and you join it together for reads as much as you can. And how you know that that's actually often not a good way is if you're doing 20 joins. If you're having to join, think about it this way. If I store details of an order, which might have 5 line items, and and it has a customer information, it has a lot of information about it. And if I take a JSON, often it's JSON object in my code or some other object. And if I have to spread that across, 10 tables or more, and then later I'm just going to pull that back together. And so you see spreading out and shredding data and then bringing it back together. Like neither of the operations are optimized, then it's probably not structured right or structured optimally. The benefit of MongoDB, and this is why I talk about we're not ideal for ad hoc workloads. Like if I don't know what the workload is, now that's maybe not a good use case for MongoDB. It may be for Atlas Search, but we'll talk about that separately. But if I know what the query patterns are and the read-write patterns and which ones I want to optimize, I have more flexibility in Mongo to store it in the way I want, where I might take an order, store it as is, and then later I'm just going to pull the order out. Like that's as optimal as you can get. I'm not doing a lot of like random IO and using a lot more IOPS on my cloud infrastructure or what have you. So, to the question, I think it's like, if you find you're just having to go all over different tables for things, it's probably not ideal. Again, if it's ad hoc, you might do more of that. But if you can, there's great benefit if you know the predefined patterns to storing the data in the way you're going to use it. And that's how you know it's optimized well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like one of the first steps. So Jesse Hall, Code Stacker on YouTube, and myself, he's my colleague in developer relations here at MongoDB, will be going live on November 29th to deliver kind of an office hours AMA and Ask Me Anything around data schemas, data modeling. So subscribe on YouTube, follow the page on LinkedIn, and you'll be notified. We're gonna release that. I think it might be going public as an event sometime next week. So data modeling, Ask Me Anything, office hours with myself and Jesse Hall coming up on November 29th. Watch for links. And a great way to stay aware is if you subscribe on YouTube and follow the page on LinkedIn. Matt, this has been a great discussion. We're quickly coming up on an hour. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we begin to wrap up?
I mean, I think on that comment, I can't emphasize more how important data modeling is.
Data modeling.
I get so many, if you look at the internet and post on the internet, which I discourage you from doing, but if you look at them, there are so many like, Mongo just doesn't work. How can you store everything in one JSON document? And the idea with Mongo is not that you store everything in one document. It's also not that you store everything across tables. You really want to understand how, for your workload, how can I get benefits of embedding some of the data, like order line items with the order, but maybe still separating customer information in its own, documents and collections, because I don't use them always together. And if I do, you can still join in Mongo and do transactions and everything. But yeah, I can't emphasize more how important data modeling is to knowing whether MongoDB is a good fit. And most of the time, if you do it right for operational application use cases, it is the best fit.
Yeah. Terrific. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your participation, for your comments, for your questions. Keep them coming. We're going to close for today, but I look forward to future sessions. We'll have to have you back on the podcast once again, Matt. Thanks so much for your time today.
Anytime. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, everyone.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.